Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Immediately, the first syllable.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are the Movie Trap. We are here, gonna do a fun show for you today.
Listen, audience, I'm gonna force Chris to leave that in real quick. If you didn't hear that, he took a huge sip of ice water. He has a full glass of ice water. Took a full 10 seconds to take a sip, get himself prepared, and the first syllable. Not how you say the word hello.
It was a
Yeah, absolutely correct. It got into the middle of the word, and then just the world went away, and suddenly we didn't have English anymore. So, all right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Movie Trap. I'm Chris. I am one of your hosts among many. Everybody else say your name.
I'm Russell Carlsen.
I'm Zach Powers. In the order that we have prescribed ourselves to say our names.
Right. That's right. Hey, we did it. We did it.
Yeah.
It's probably because I didn't have to say my name this time. That's how we managed to make that order work.
Well, you had to say it first. That's usually... Anyway, doesn't matter.
This is our spooky, scary, creepy, crawly, horror anthology of terror. And it's the concluding episode.
That's
we're concluding with a very summery horror movie, appropriate for us in the time we're living in pre-recording this, where it's hot as fuck. Perhaps less so for you, where it's probably October 30th if you're listening this on day of release.
Yes, that's right.
By then, the evil yellow face has probably gone far enough away from the planet not to burn people anymore. So yeah, it's a...
This will be the last episode before you know the results of the presidential election, so have fun.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure when this comes out, I won't be sleeping. I'll be very awake. I'll be very aware when this episode comes out, so hopefully we'll have good news in the next couple days.
And if we have bad news, we're apologies if our next episode is not as grim as it should be, where we'll just be like, hey, whatever.
I mean, we're all clamoring, and spoilers as always, we're all clamoring that we pagans can defeat the Christian establishment.
Well, and like the Wicker Man, you will be watching this in October and not in August or in May when this movie's supposed to be, because apparently it was shot in like the fall and stuff. So anyway, before we get into all that, Boruff, why don't you give us a rundown for 1973's The Wicker Man?
Yes, sir. Basically, here's what's going on. It's a classic whodunit. The film starts off, we get introduced to Sergeant Neil Howie, who is a very, very Christian, very proud, very kind of, I would say, uptight individual, who goes to the island. He has to come in on a seaplane. You get the sense that this is a very difficult to get to island that's very remote. It's off the coast of Scotland. And essentially what goes on is he starts going around asking for Rowan. He's come to the island seeking a child who was reported missing to him. And as he's going through it, people keep saying Rowan doesn't exist. We don't know anybody named Rowan. He has a photo that he keeps introducing to people, and they all say, no, we don't know this person. We've never seen this person. The investigation eventually leads him past a bunch of really surreal, strange things. One of the details I should point out is he's also staying at sort of a local hotel/pub.
The Green Man.
Called the Green Man. Which I think it's also a Celtic reference. But as they get into it, it becomes a explosion of sort of Celtic surreal imagery as he's trying to do his like straightforward investigation, where like he goes past like a whole field of people. Like his first night there, I believe, he goes past a whole field of people having sex openly in the air, in slow motion, in a way that's very kind of weird. Like maybe that was something common in the 60s, but
right.
70s,
I was about to say,
but like
prude cop who doesn't like the Love Generation.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, he's been set up very much as the straight man to this loosey-goosey, everybody kissing everybody community. He's going around, he's trying to search out this child. He does a number of different kind of odd things, like he starts investigating different places. He finds that there's a bunch of old photos of various May Queens that have been shown over the years. They introduce that a lot of children are like building a maypole, and that there's a whole elementary school, and that it's the Celtic training goes way back to like when they're kids. So this is something that isn't like a brand new weird thing going on. This is something that's like a tenet of the whole community. And then he finally finds that there's a grave. Like, he finds the one piece of fact that he can get that proves this child existed, because he's found a grave for Rowan. And to him, he thinks that if he can prove that this grave is empty, or if this grave has a body in it, he can find out what happened to this child, and he kind of close the case. If it's a murder, he'll find out, or what's going on. So, to that end, he winds up going and meeting with Lord Summerisle, who's played by Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee, I think a lord in this case is sort of like the local mayor. I'm a little foggy on English law.
Yeah,
he's descended from the people who seemed to have established this island community, or at least at the very minimum, the means of their economic survival.
Yeah.
Right.
That's kind of what happens when he meets him. He briefly turns into like a Morrowind, or like an EverQuest NPC, and he just like dumps a whole pile of background story about the island.
Right. Here's my grandfather.
Here's my grandfather. He goes into like the economic history of it. He goes into like why they're all Celtic now, and he essentially explains that it is like a function of the economy to sell apples to people on the island. Like, his grandfather invented an apple that would only grow on the island, and then somehow it got conflated with the whole religious arc of it, and then the entire island eventually did away with Christianity and turned full Celtic old religion again, and this all like kind of feeds into what the inspector is thinking he's going to say.
Everything that was going on with the IRA. They said, no, thank you. We're going to do our own stuff.
Well, at this point, if they founded it during the Victorian era, I think Scotland was still sorting itself out with the way the United Kingdom was sorting it out with Queen Victoria at the time, if I'm not mistaken, which I very much could be. But yeah, there is, the whole movie is this sort of clash of cultures, isn't it? That's pretty much what it is. And they're telling that it's, again, from Europe. They've had one or two of those maybe in history.
Yeah. Well, it's been kind of odd in this one because the islands themselves are essentially, they are on the west side of the entire country. And they also are like split up enough so that they get further and further out, so it becomes really, really hard to get to. So you have to imagine that for us, this would be like going into the Appalachians or some strange off the cusp, like rural community that is just completely taken away from everybody else.
I have a point of comparison for this that's a little interesting, but I do want to save it until we conclude the rundown of the plot of this film.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, basically, what goes on? He goes to meet with Lord Summerisle. Lord Summerisle says, "Go ahead and dig the body up. I don't care." The inspector then digs the body up, but inside the grave, rather than finding a child or anything reasonable, he finds a rabbit, or specifically a hare, and then brings it back. It's of course dead. Presents it to Lord Summerisle, and Lord Summerisle says, I don't know what I can do for you. That's a weird thing that a grave would have a hare in it. And essentially, the inspector goes completely wild trying to figure out what is happening. Goes back to the hotel, I believe, and breaks into or finds the photo. He somehow comes across the photo. I believe it's the
postmaster. I believe it's Mae Morrison's little postmaster / candy shop or whatever.
Yeah, he breaks in and finds the photo of Rowan surrounded by a entire harvest of failed apples, and he assumes now
there's
that
very few compared to the other May Queen photos. There's very few crops.
Yeah. So the assumption for him at that point is that somebody on the inside was trying to get him to come and save this child, and has reported it in some way, and he's supposed to go get her, and so he then plans on doing that. However, at night,
he believes specifically that during their big May Day celebration, because certain pagan or Celtic communities think that a sacrifice will bring the crops back, Rowan has been stowed aside, is still alive, and is scheduled to be killed on May Day as human sacrifice.
Yes.
Is the conclusion he comes to.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's the simplest one based off all the information he's been handed. Of course, there's going to be a human sacrifice. This ghost child that I think definitely exists.
Right.
So what happens is the next morning he is awoken abruptly after a brief interlude where I think the landlord's daughter tries to sleep with him again by sort of doing a sexy dance and slapping on the walls.
Don't forget about the jaunty tune.
Yeah. And then he is awoken abruptly by a hand of glory, which is a wax-covered hand that has been turned... It's a human hand that has been turned into a candle, and it's burning at the edge of his bed, and he's just a real abrupt awakening, goes downstairs, eventually knocks out, I believe, the innkeeper, steals the innkeeper's costume for Mayday, and goes completely rogue.
Coincidentally, that costume is the Fool. Punch the Fool.
Uh-huh. So then he goes door to door, essentially ransacking people's houses that don't have anyone home right then, to see if he can find out where Rowan has been hidden, I believe. And then eventually finds himself running around with the Mayday Parade itself, which has a couple scary moments and a couple fake-outs where you think he might get his head cut off. But at the end, he finally finds Rowan and... doesn't kidnap her. He rescues her. And in the middle of it, there is a back and forth. He runs through a little island-side cave out to the water. And when he gets out there, he is abruptly surprised by the reveal that Rowan was leading him to a group of people who then abruptly kidnap him, push him inside of a wicker man.
Who are Lord Summerisle, and the whole village is there, and that this whole thing was a ruse to get you here because you're a virgin cop who represents the king and who's a fool who, thinks you're going to save them.
Christian ideals and all that stuff.
Yeah. So essentially he has been leading himself to this point, and the whole town has pulled the wool over his eye, and then over his eyes, and then he is shoved into a wicker man that is set up for him. And the end of the film is literally the wicker man on fire burning as he's screaming, and the general kind of creepy coda that if the apples fail next year, they'll probably shove Christopher Lee into the Wicker Man himself.
The end. It's a positive, positive outlook. And the Wicker Man is gigantic. I mean, it's this huge, hulking thing
large
with also
effigy.
Right, yeah, with all these different little animals, like
There's
baby animals in it and shit. Yeah, and that is the climax of the movie. It's the only point where you really kind of feel terror, where you really are like, this is fucking nuts.
There's creepy things, but
yeah.
But the scene where he actually dies is like, he starts by reciting verse from the Bible, and then eventually begins to scream at the villagers about how insane they are, and then eventually just screams in pain as the fire overtakes him, and then he silences down, and you see like the Wicker Man start to crumble with the sun behind it. It's a very well done sequence.
Yeah, it's very well shot too. Apparently the director and the director of photography didn't get along, but they hired him because they knew he could get that shot, which in that case, well worth it. But the whole movie, like we were kind of talking, it is a kind of dissection of culture and religion, both ancient and otherwise, because you brought up that image of the cop with the naked people. Considering how not far removed we are from the Love generation, I wonder how much of a commentary that and how much that really did resonate with audiences because of that, and it's considering when it was released in 1973.
Probably, yeah. This one had kind of a strange release history. I don't know how much you guys did in the research.
I kind of did some digging on it. It does sound very convoluted and complicated, and a lot of hands and a lot of different pots. And again, the fact that it was the B-side to Don't Look Now is just quite risible.
It's actually doubly a problem. I think that Don't Look Now and this being paired back to back is super. I think there's a lot that those films have in common. I also think Phantasm has a few things in common with them too. But in particular, and I might have mentioned this last episode, but I can't remember. When you look back on it, it's very clear and has been admitted by the director that in terms of one of the three biggest names of modern horror coming up right now, Ari Aster, Hereditary was deeply influenced by Don't Look Now, and Midsommar was obviously deeply influenced by
You
the
can
Wicker
draw
Man.
a straight line.
Yeah.
I mean, it like Midsummer's, the hang up isn't really like religion or a clash of cultures, really. It's more of her and a dealing
No,
with
it's a
grief.
different
and,
theme.
Yeah.
He does a different theme with the same idea.
Right, but
there are
very
many
similar
beats
idea.
that are the same.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
part of that is
100%.
because some of these terms are common in pagan cultures, like May Queen or whatever, the symbology of the people in like an animal costume or what have you. But
absolutely. With Ari Aster's thing, it was also like the whole sort of odd cultish remote community that's cut off from the whole outside world. So yeah, it's very clear to see there would be a link between those two.
Well, and also not just that, both Midsummer and this movie, the sense of danger, it's also in the way it's shot. Now, our Midsummer, they directly take drugs and trip acid and trip mushrooms and shit. So this movie, but it's shot like an acid trip. I mean, it the way you kind of get in these kind of weird waves of comfort and discomfort, and then completely offended to the point where, and then by the end of it, it's sheer terror and panic and paranoia. Whereas in Midsummer, they take the drugs. This movie is more inducing the drug to you.
Yeah.
But the goals, I think, are also different. Not to go into Midsummer too much, but this is a man who is going to be, the protagonist is a man who is going to be consumed by this cult, and the protagonist, I mean, in that movie is also someone who's going to be consumed by this cult, but not physically.
Not the way you think.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it seems like it's also a difference in terms of the scale of what's happening. Because in one film, it feels like it's very much more a sense of his mores being challenged, and in the other film, Midsummer, it's a far more psychological and more inflected by,
I think,
like pop sci sort of understanding of what her horror is.
And I also think that, I'll be honest, like overall in terms of talking about themes, probably I'd have more to say about Midsummer than this film at the end of the day. I've talked about it with my girlfriend quite a lot, but I think that's a discussion we could save for another day.
Yeah,
maybe.
For sure. But
This one, one thing about this one that's kind of funny is the writer. Like, there are many different versions of this film. I should ask, when you guys watched, did it say Ari Shaffer's The Wicker Man? Okay.
I can't remember.
Yep.
I
watched the one on Netflix.
Gotcha, because it's the writer, not the director.
Right.
Which is kind of an unusual flip on these, but I think it's because of how this one got put together, because it's obviously Christopher Lee's star vehicle, even though he only appears like towards
one of his
end.
most famous roles, probably of his entire career.
I think it's one of his best. I actually agree with his opinion.
Supposedly he worked for free on this one, and it's like the only way they got this film made was because he worked for free, and a bunch of other people worked for free. But he was a big fan of the writer, and that's kind of one of the things, because it's strange, because this one, you often think of like Robin Hardy and sort of the director as having the auteurship, that whole theory. But this one's really the flip of that, because Ari Shaffer was a playwright, so I think that's how he must have met Christopher Lee and how they got involved, because it was like Christopher Lee and then them came together, and they were like, we want to work together, and then he found a novel called Ritual, and then they kind of turned it into a thing. But
if I'm not mistaken, I think Sleuth was kind of Schaefer's kind of introduction into Hollywood, because that was his play, and then it was turned into an Olivier Michael Caine movie. Cannot find that movie anywhere, by the way. Cannot find that fucking movie anywhere.
Really?
It's not anywhere on streaming. You have to order the DVD or the Blu-ray.
I could potentially find it. We'll talk about that later.
Right,
but Frenzy was also one of his, like the Hitchcock movie.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, and so it's not like this was like his first foray into making a movie, but this is one of the ones that, from what I read, it sounds like this was Christopher Lee's sort of like, this is one of his passion projects, that he really believed that he was really wanted to play this character, and good for him, because he really did a really good job. It was very difficult to be, for one, the delivery by Christopher Lee you can't be, because he's just got that great fucking voice, but also to be seemingly benevolent and benign, but also very menacing and very, like...
He's got... both as... Christopher Lee's an interesting case, because both as a performer, his style is very unique and difficult to be replicated, but also as an individual, his story is so unique that he's this weird spy Nazi hunter turned actor turned late-aged metal artist.
Yeah.
Who was best friends with Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
Like,
who was also a descendant of Charlemagne. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
He's like a very unique figure just culturally that like it's almost like who he was in person can't help but bleed into how you perceive him on the screen.
Very true. And also credit to Edward Woodward too, who played the kind of the opposite of him in our hapless cop, or hapless prudish cop who doesn't like sex or nudity or any of that thing of that like.
He was like playing like a wild police detective at the time.
That's why I'm baffled they try to remake this movie. Like it literally makes my jaw drop. You know,
we could talk about it a little more later. Have either of you seen the remake?
I haven't seen it in quite some time. I think I watched it as like a college prank.
I have indeed seen it.
Okay.
The author and possibly director, but I think both.
It is both.
Is Neil Butte. Now, Neil Butte is someone who had some success in the playwriting world for a while. He wrote the screenplay. His biggest success was probably that movie that was an early Aaron Eckhart movie. It might have been called like In the Company of Men.
Oh yeah, in the Company of Men. But it was where that was the film with Aaron Eckhart and another character where it was two men led by Aaron Eckhart sort of predating on a deaf woman, correct?
Something of that nature. I have not actually seen it, but I've heard it's his best work. That said, almost everything he's done in at least the past 20 years has been almost unanimously considered by the film and or theater community to reek of very intense misogyny, and the Wicker Man remake is no exception.
That doesn't shock because like in the remake, the Christopher Lee character is played by Ellen Burstyn. Now Ellen Burstyn's a fine actress.
She's a fine all-female cult.
Yeah.
In the remake, it's like a women-led cult that is like trying to destroy men.
But it like takes place in the States, right? It takes place in the United States.
Yeah, I think it's some island off the New England coast.
It's not otherness enough. This one's kind of special because it it was in contrast to everything else that was at the time. Like, Christopher Lee and they were all making Hammer films.
Right.
And Hammer films were like very, very gothic and very kind of regimented, and a lot of them almost were as like I would say as pragmatically designed.
There we go. That's a good. Set. There you go. That's pragmatic. Yeah. You could say. Yeah. You could say inexpensive and easy to move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one's like the other extreme of that because it was like almost like a high art film sort of because it had a very classy presentation, but it was hated at the time. Like
I'm not too surprised.
I'm not surprised by that at all.
The problem is that it was owned by British Lion. There's a guy named Peter Schnell, who was originally like part of the Three Musketeers getting the film done. It was Ari Schaefer, Peter Schnell, and Robin Hardy working together. Well, at one point, like another person came in and bought out British Lion. It was another company, and this other company had been doing like really high-key slapstick comedy fare. So they had this film suddenly that's like a intense, like horror film. And they fired Schnell after the film had been done, and they didn't want to release that because it didn't make any sense for their company. So they couldn't find anybody else to buy it. They kept trying to go different places. They eventually wound up selling it partially, or tempting Roger Corman to buy it.
I was about to... Boruff, you just got a point, buddy.
Which gets even stranger. I mean, it's a funny piece of history because Roger Corman ends up saving the movie at one point.
That's pretty fucking funny.
Yeah, like all the copies had gotten burnt and destroyed except for Roger Corman's, and so Roger Corman, who didn't end up distributing the movie, was the guy who did it, and then
but he still had like the original cut. Yeah. That's so. I mean, you could say a lot about Roger Corman, and I could say plenty, but you can't deny he is an odd cornerstone of the film of the 70s, bridging the 50s to the 70s. You can't deny his legacy. And this movie is actually oddly no exception, even that he didn't he just kept the original and didn't fucking touch it. So good for him.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because it's like the first like independent horror film, sort of, because it wasn't owned by a company. Like the company killed it, and that's why it was eventually a double bill, like you guys are talking about with Don't Look Now, because they just were like shuffling it off.
Honestly, I think it served it pretty well. I think having a double bill between that and Don't Look Now, I think it actually served it pretty well. Both movies actually served pretty well because they're both very arty. They're both very kind of like in these weird, not really a dreamscape. I mean, I think Wicker Man's a little bit more straightforward in that it's like you said, kind of a whodunit mystery, but it's the way his degeneration into sort of accepting it and then just being Captain America and I'm going to go save the girl, god damn it. You know, like outside of official bit, I'm going to clunk the guy on the head, would become a clown. Whereas like Don't Look Now relies on the film itself to sort of like convey the telepathy and the ESP. This one's pretty straightforward, surprisingly. Like you say, you even have the whole Christopher Lee exposition speech. Well, you see, Lieutenant, we've been doing this for centuries. You know.
Yeah,
anyway.
they do a lot of like the best like whodunit stuff where they quadruple double check that you understand that this is a hint and a clue and a false lead. I have a question for you guys though. Why do you think this one stands up so well since it is a whodunit? Because most of the time with whodunits, like the suspense is broken by whodunit because it becomes an intellectual question by the end.
I don't think that. I don't know. You describe it as a whodunit, but part of me is like, is it? Because like when I watch this movie, the degree to which I give a shit about what happened specifically to Rowan or where she is deeply secondary to just figuring out the nature of this community and the weird way they are clearly at the worst manipulating and preying on this guy, and at the best at least inscrutable to him. I completely agree with you. That's why the whodunitness of the mystery doesn't really come about where the fuck happened to Rowan Morrison, but really that becomes what is going on with this goddamn island, like what is happening with these people, and that happens almost immediately. That happens almost immediately. It pretty much chops the head off when he goes and visits the school and they're learning about penises or whatever. And of course, like Captain fucking Cop Christian can't stand that, and he's gonna go say something because everything offends me. And it you know, that's why and also I've got to say, you know, the music in this movie, because it does kind of teeter a little bit towards the musical theater side. It is
quite a bit.
I watched this with my girlfriend Shannon, and she counted, I think she said 7 original songs, and she was like, "You write 2 more, put this on stage. Like you give the cop like a Hellfire from Hunchback in Notre Dame number. Maybe give Lord Summerisle like a fun little tune.
Jekyll and Hyde, I need to know, that kind of thing. Yeah, it'll be great.
And you got a musical on your hands,
that's
baby.
true. That's true.
Yeah.
You know,
it was also funny because it was written sort of as a musical on the back end. I watched I'll send you guys this and I'll put it in the show notes. There was a documentary on the making of this thing, but they had to pre-record all the audio so that they could time it up when they were shooting. So they already had all the songs going in. So it was like very much like you guys are just saying. It was something where they had written the song for the movie, not trying to adapt a scene for a song that was written outside the movie. So
they like formed a band for this movie. Yeah. Like they like this was, and then they just all smoked weed and just giggled a lot. You know, and it is because you could tell it's a little experimental. It kind of is like a folky Celtic feel, and then like this psychedelic guitar comes in, you know, and then it's sort of all these people are singing and then they're naked, and you're like, it is like I said, this movie's like kind of an acid trip, you know, and that's why I never really knew. I mean, I always thought, so one of my favorite bands, I'm wearing the shirt, Neurosis, they chose the climactic image of the film as the title for their 1990 album Souls at Zero. I always thought it was just Burning Man or some bullshit, but I didn't know it was from this movie. And I should have known because they literally sample a bit of Christopher Lee's speech in the fucking album. So much for my super fan status.
What's funny, because this one, like, a lot of music references this film. Like, I think probably because it's, like, both kind of a goth or, like,
I think it's an Iron Maiden
movie.
song, too, yeah.
But there's also, like, Blood Ceremony, which is, like, a surprisingly soft 70s style, I would almost say Jethro Tull style band.
Yeah. Yeah, they lead pretty heavily into the Jethro Tull.
They cover the final song in this movie as one of their big songs. I kind of wish someone would do a cover album of the whole thing.
As much as the actual themes might be more in line with like something that death metal might cover, or some of the certain lines, the music itself is like Vashti Bunyan, like mid-60s folk shit.
Yeah, right. But it's the beginning of the 70s, right? So they're still having like this kind of weird psychedelic rock's already kind of been a thing now to sort of kind of mold that into the narrative of the film, really. I thought was pretty impressive. I could see why a lot of musicians appreciate this the soundtrack, because it's pretty good.
Well, it's also so frank. Like, a lot of the writing in this and a lot of the music was based off a bunch of the research that I guess Robin Hardy was doing. Like,
they're like from the 1300s. You know?
He had like a heart attack or something, and they said, and his wife requested that he not be allowed to go out and do like strenuous labor, so they put him on a research gig for this, where he was researching it with Ari Shaffer, and I guess they came up with a bunch of the things like the Wicker Man and the rest of it. But that was part of the thing, was him doing research into these old things. So all those songs were all sort of based off old, like, I think there was actually a poet they worked with who rewrote those songs, specifically incorporating some of the research that had occurred.
Yeah. I read at least a couple of them are very, traditional Celtic songs, which is interesting. I mean, like, a lot of the terms are definitely things that I think are genuinely adapted from old pagan and Celtic traditions. One thing I was going to mention is I haven't gone to this in a few years. Deep in the mountains in a town called Crested, Butte, there is a end of fall festival called Vinotok, which involves the trial of the Green Man versus the Grump, which is a public trial. Everybody's quite drunk. It's in the streets. And there's also the most pregnant woman in the town is, again, the May Queen. And it ends with a Grump, which is a giant 20-foot tall effigy, being dragged down Main Street to an empty lot and burned in a fire. And it's extremely like the Wicker Man. This is before Midsummer came out, and it's just so like directly. And I don't think it's like meant to be, this is our riff on the Wicker Man. I think it's truly like, these are just how pagan festivals tend to go.
Yeah. I mean, it's well. It's
there's also a lot of mushrooms going around.
Oh, so. Yeah, I'm sure. That's why I mean, like, it must be, depending on where you can fall in this psychedelic journey, it could either be enlightening. This is another difference, I think, with Midsummer, because I think the character actually had catharsis, whereas, poor Howie never gets catharsis. He's doomed. And that's why it again, sort of like an acid trip. You could either have catharsis or dread and terrible.
Well, I don't know if he actually gets. I think he might get catharsis because he dies. Like, for him, being a
martyr is in some ways.
That I love that line too, and that's why I really like that this movie is more of a dissection about religion and culture, ancient and otherwise, because Christopher Lee's pitch to him is like, you should be celebrating this death. Do you know how rare it is to die a Christian martyr in the 70s? I thought it was pretty, it's more of a commentary about religion in general, and that's why it's super cool.
Well, that's why I think this one stands up for me because of that. Like, there's so many times you go back and you look at things from this era, and there'll be some sort of a thing just sticking out like a sore thumb. Like, you go into The Omen, and it's fine. It plays for an atheist right up to a point when suddenly they reveal, nope, God's real. It's a whole thing, and it takes away any sort of fun with that one. But this one, you can watch it straight and just, assume that everyone's crazy because they're all religious. And, it seems real weird that you guys eat little discs of bread that
you say is a body
of your Christ. That's a weird cannibalism thing. Yep. I don't understand that.
Yeah, you're going to literally pay a carpenter $3,000 to build something that you're just going to bury in the ground and forget about forever because that's what they say is going to happen at the resurrection when he comes back again.
So you want to be toxic, hazardous waste that's been put into the groundwater in the aquifer. You want to become okay.
So it's written in the good book.
Ground.
That's right. and so that, to Zach's point, I guess he's right that it does kind of have a bit of a shade of phantasm in it about how we treat the dead, and what we do with the dead, 'Cause anyway,
I think, I think it's a great companion for the other. I think all three of these worked well together, not just because they're deeply 70s, but because like 70s horror as a thing. I mean, these are some of the less Wicker Man is probably the most famous of the three, but these are like not the most discussed horror films of the 1970s.
Right. And this one is, and only one out of the three was like meant to be scary. Like I think Phantasm was more of traditional sort of horror movie, like you would see a horror movie. Don't Look Now and certainly Wicker Man are very much like
thriller.
They're in the intellectual mode.
Psychological horror.
Yeah, definitely more Don't Look Now than Wicker Man, because Wicker Man still does kind of have a through line. Then there's a plot that follows. It kind of pulls the wool over your eyes and you kind of take the punch at the end, but it's still pretty straightforward.
I do think there's aspects of it's well recorded. There's so many aspects of 70s filmmaking that are just the Wild West of filmmaking. Mm-hmm. I think the three movies we have here, particularly in the order we watch them, represent like two opposing ideas of how that filmmaking can work or not work, and then a synthesis where it kind of works together. So you've got Phantasm, where it is absolutely bonkers, buck wild, random shit happens because nobody knew how to make a movie yet.
Right. Yeah, right.
And then,
but the scary balls.
And then Don't Look Now, which is a very low key, gentle, by modern standards, extraordinarily slow film. That comes to its conclusion, but is trying to be a dream or a riff on a theme. And then you have this that's something of a mix between the two, where you get random crazy shit happening and it works in the universe of the film. It doesn't seem completely pointless. And at the same time seems to be trying to make a thematic point. And I think it was very, I don't know. It's almost like those two movies blended together to make this third one for me in some regards.
It's Boruff, funny you talk about it. Well, it's really funny that you kind of talk about the length thing and the fact that it's fairly to the point and not boring, because I guess there was 40 minutes or something that got lost from this film. Which occurred due to it that whole thing I was talking about. It was a complicated thing.
Several handoffs.
The negatives from this film are part of the M4 motorway in England at this point. They got thrown away, turned into rubbish.
Yeah, the chain of custody of this movie, I think, was a big problem with the way it's sort of terse.
Yeah, but it's weird because that kind of helped it out. The perfect version was sort of the slightly longer version that they had from, I think they found in 2000 something. I think it was that late. They eventually found an answer print. But in the current length, it's kind of perfect. I think
the length works great for it.
Yeah, I guess there were whole scenes in which Lord Summerisle was talking about apples. There were long sequences where he was just lovingly talking about apples and other things. One scene that I missed that it would have been nice to have seen would have been the one that it set up why he ended up on the island in the first place. Because I guess there was a thing where he gets, in some of the cut footage, he gets a card with the picture inside, personally addressed to him. So it's someone picked him out of a crowd, and then that kind of sets up the whole thing rather than just being the...
That would be a totally fair inclusion, because clearly they have chosen this guy intentionally.
Yeah. It's also one of those things where I wondered the entire time, why aren't any other cops showing up? Why is
right? I thought that they usually send a partner. You at least get another person. There's usually another cop going with you, especially if you're going that remote.
Slightly explained. Obviously, he tries to leave on a plane at a certain point and is interrupted from pursuing that goal.
Marooned, right? Yeah.
Yeah, with the Islanders on the on the mainland in their animal masks for the first time, like popping up over the brick walls.
That's where he's getting his plane. I'm getting the fuck out of here. Yeah, that's why I think that the briefness of this movie, I was surprised of how short it was. Because it's rare for me to say this, but I could have gone for a little bit longer. I wouldn't have minded a little bit more of a atmosphere, because I felt like that end montage where he's like going through all the houses and stuff, I felt that a pretty jarring and almost comical in some ways. You know, it just felt like more like, I understand why they did it, because, you know, you're trying to ramp up to the climax. But I don't know. I could have, like I said, it's rare for me to say that. I rarely say that. But for this movie, I'd have been okay with it.
Yeah.
If done right. I mean, if it's just a soliloquy about apples, I doubt it. But
yeah, it's just one of those things. It's always interesting when you look at like how a film comes together, like what was intentional versus what just occurred due to the need to cut something.
It's the beauty of the art form. Beauty of the art form. Yeah, that's why I think this movie. I not only can I believe they remade this movie, but they even tried to do a sequel. And all of the descriptions of the sequel that I saw were very, very not impressive. Yeah. Like, why? Why make a sequel? I feel like you kind of wrap this up.
Are you talking about the Wicker Tree?
No, not even that, because I think even Shaffer wrote, like, it's called like the Lambton worm or whatever, and there's actually a dragon or some shit.
God, I didn't actually read any of that. I only knew that the produced film after this was the one that Robin Hardy put out, I think when I was like wrapping up college. It was like in 20-something. Anyway, it was called The Wicker Tree, and it was essentially the same story, except in place of the two... in place of the inspector, they instead had two cowboys for Christ, like kids from Texas, who essentially go through the exact same story. I think Laddie, which is the name that one of the characters has that I think is common over there, but not super common in Texas. Laddie was sacrificed, I believe, in that one. And then the rest of the film's trying to figure out what happened to Laddie.
Right, yeah.
From Christopher Lee,
I just say, like, you kind of wrapped up everything I need to know about this. Like, what's, I mean, I don't know what.
We got well, I mean, it's not, I don't think there is an element of this that is a mystery film, even if I don't know if the whodunit is at the heart of it. And at the end of this movie, the mystery is revealed.
Yeah,
it is satisfyingly concluded.
Right. Yeah. I will say, boy, they got out of those costumes rather quickly, didn't they? Expert makeup wiping off by Christopher Lee.
That was one of those things where I was like, I wonder if they cut something out, and that might explain why they got changed so quick. Or if
I hope not. Just go with it.
Them just taking it off.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares but me. I mean, I don't blame them, but anyway, I think that. You know, you kind of, what more variations on this theme do you honestly need to go after? You know, I mean, I think you kind of put it ends, Wicker Man, sunset, roll credits, end a movie. I don't really need to know what happened the next year or the next 100 years.
Yeah, I agree. Or the previous 100 years, which is why I'm glad we don't have scenes about Christopher Lee talking about apples.
That's right.
This was like just the start of Shaffer. He went off and did a bunch of like Agatha Christie things, like scripts of the films. So he essentially just turned into a whodunit writer. And then Robin Hardy did one other film called The Fanaticist, which I think was like a crime movie. And then he eventually did The Wicker Tree, which was the thing I just described, and that was it. That was the only like theatrical directing stuff he did.
Right, and I don't think Woodward did too much outside. I mean, he was always he was a creature of television, and I don't think he ventured very far from that. Except he had a brief cameo in Hot Fuzz, which is nice.
But that was because he was also in The Equalizer, I think. Or well, no, in Hot Fuzz it was a direct reference. Sorry, in Hot Fuzz is probably a direct reference to
Equalizer,
the Wicker Man.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It is, because it's a whole weird villain anyway. And that's why I think that it's nice. Christopher Lee was already pretty well established by the time this movie came out. I mean, he'd been making movies for 100 years at that point. But I think it is one of an alt. If you're a fan of Christopher Lee and you have not seen this movie, you don't know how much of a fan of Christopher Lee you are.
He does, fair warning. I was almost surprised. I'd forgotten how far into the movie we go before Christopher Lee actually makes his cameo, especially because I feel like almost more so than the cop, the thing people remember about this movie is Lord Summerisle.
in his
Well,
mansion.
it's like Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs. He's only in that movie for 10 minutes, and yet that's the only thing anyone ever talks about is that particular sequence.
More than that, more than Lecter, it kind of reminds me of Orson Welles always talked about why he liked playing Harry Lime in The Third Man, because you're only in a quarter of the movie, but the rest of the movie they're talking about you. You're the guy they're talking about, and Summerisle kind of has a very similar feel to it because he's always referred to, and that's why it's so shocking if you've never seen this movie how nice and polite and sort of like benign he is, but yet because of it's Christopher Lee and the way he performs it.
Probably, I mean, granted, he probably did do this around the same time he made this movie. There is a little bit of that Bond villain vibe going on. Christopher Lee also did Man with the Golden Gun sometime in
with Brett
the early
Eklund.
70s. So it's probably a year or two after this.
With Brett Eklund, if I'm not mistaken.
He's very congenial in this. That's the thing. He comes across very slick and very friendly.
Yeah.
My wife described him as sexy, which I thought was very funny because she didn't. I didn't pick up on that one, but I guess I'm going to accept her opinion on that because she picked me too, so I'm not going to argue too much.
That wig is quite a wig.
Yeah. You both do have like a very low baritone voice, so I mean, I could kind of, Well,
it's funny. I think the thing I always had the theory on is it's because he has that whole scene where he kind of does like a Twisted Sister, like heavy metal vibe, where he puts on like he dresses up as Judy, I believe, from the Punch and Judy.
That's right, isn't it? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So he dresses up as Judy. He has long black hair and painted face, so he looks almost exactly like most death metal bands. It's an interesting, weird little crossover.
Well, I mean, I've got all I wanted to say. If you guys want to move on to overall thoughts,
I know. I mean, it's worth noting. Obviously, Judy being the counterpart of Punch and Judy shows,
right? So which is actually an English tradition, not necessarily a Scottish tradition. If I'm not, that's what I read anyway. But I mean, unless you guys got anything else, I think I could give my overall impression of it.
We could move on to final thoughts if everybody's.
Yeah,
in that mind space.
All right. Well, I guess I'll go first since I went first in this round. Pretty fucking good movie. Pretty fucking good. I mean, not without its flaws, but it's pretty effective in this movie. It's definitely a movie of its time. Like, I think even more so than Don't Look Now and Phantasm. Don't Look Now a little bit with the ESP, and Phantasm sort of the low budget chicness of it. Wicker Man is a commentary about culture clashing, and they're just. The West, at least, is getting out of this whole love generation thing. And so this is kind of a reflection on that in some respect, but it's a very terse but atmospheric psychedelic panic. Like the way the movie paces itself increases your own sense of danger. You never really feel like the sense of danger is real and then it kind of creeps up on it, and then by the time you realize the sense of danger is real, it is far too late. There is no going back. You're fucked. So yeah, I mean, fucking good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would make me second, since that is the order that we do these things in. So I agree with a lot of what Russell says. Yeah, I think the build is excellently done here in terms of both you and this cop understanding first that something is off about the community, and then a little bit more off, and then that perhaps the danger that you had assumed was being placed on this little girl is in fact upon you, like it's beating down your doorstep and you didn't even realize it. Like, I think that build is great. I think it's like super well done. I think the movie holds up pretty goddamn well all these years later. Nearly 50 years later. I think for the major issues I had with the first two, I just did not have as much with this movie. Like, straight up. Like, I don't know how else to say it. I think this is a fun one. I think it's worth revisiting. If we manage to keep this podcast going until next Halloween, however, I think I'm gonna have to resolve myself to pick something that's a little bit more straight up a horror film because I think we lowballed it a little bit this time.
I was about to say I think my pick was the only actual straightforward fucking horror movie.
Yeah, we went a little bit too like film snob, psychological. Maybe it was because we got that random roll of like the 60s and 70s, so we were like, we can't just pick Texas Chainsaw.
Right, yeah. Jaws, what are we thinking?
Yeah, that's kind of what I felt too, because it was like there's a bunch of them that I could have picked, but it's like I really have to have like an oddball, off the wall category for me to jump for that. Because these, it's like I of course picked this one because it's one of my favorite films, so I couldn't really not pick it. But
Fair enough.
As I mentioned, I considered doing Black Christmas right when the topic came up, and then I was like, nah, I feel like I got to do something that didn't feel quite right for whatever reason. But Chris,
well, it's funny because if you'd picked out Black Christmas, I might have accidentally picked out Don't Look Now. So you set up your own trap. There you go. For me, this is one of my favorite films. I watch it every Halloween, so I just had to pick it. I've always loved Ed Woodward in this, and of course everybody loves Christopher Lee. So. There's nothing really to fault in this movie. I love the fact that it still stands up. I love the fact that it's still weird English people in an odd community, because that's something that I never get to see. Like we go out into the country here and we have kind of, rednecks, or as I would call them, family, off in the sticks. And so what happens is that it's interesting to see that sort of a comparative view of it. Whereas later you see things where people over there see our people in the sticks as sort of monstrous and scary, with John Borman directing Deliverance.
Mm-hmm. Was going to be one of my picks too, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a horror movie.
Yeah. So yeah, this is one of my favorite ones. I would recommend it to everybody. It stands up. Don't watch the remake.
I think we made that clear. Put a big nuclear sign on it.
Well, a lot of people actually have not seen this one yet, so I'd still suggest it.
The remake has a certain good bad status. That's true depending on who you are. There's the famous "Not the Bees" sequence.
Yeah, it's become like a meme.
It ends with Nick Cage punching more than a few women in the face. But when we watched it, it was like, oh, this feels more toxic than fun in the writer's ideology.
Yeah.
Well, it's also funny. Yeah, especially having that one in place with it being a Neil LaBute film now, like understanding that in terms of the whole au revoir. All right, however you pronounce that. Au revoir. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is just my favorite, so we can probably go into the numbers. Oeuvre, there we go. Yeah. I hate that word. It's so hard.
I want to say two things before we go into the voting thing, though. I should have included in my final thoughts, but I'm a sloppy idiot. First, I came down a little hard. I liked all three of these films. I think the degree to which I would be willing to watch each of them again varies. I think for instance, I don't think Phantasm is a better film than Don't Look Now, although I would probably rewatch Phantasm before I would rewatch Don't Look Now.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
I'm glad I saw three of them. I think there's great things in all three of them. I don't want to make it sound like I was two of these movies sucked and one of them was great. I think it was a pretty solid round.
No. Yeah.
And also, you might be hearing thunder on my end. I guess the weather is corresponding with our theme of horror movies, but apologies.
We're at the climax of the round. We're in the atrium, and Detective Clouseau is about to reveal who killed.
Being in LA, I'm more excited about the fact that you actually had weather. That there's actually things happening in the sky when you look outside, as opposed to just fire slowly drifting through the distance, or
And now
ash.
I also have one more point to give away. I have 13 points. At this point, you both have 12. There's nothing scarier to me than 13 points. I'm going to give mine to one of you, so you can also have 13 points. I'm going to go with... This was Chris's pick. This was Chris's episode. I'm going to give mine to his, but to him. In this
Thank you.
case.
Thank you, sir.
Fair enough.
Now that you mentioned the thing with math, I suddenly had to redo some math in my head. So I have my cards ready, though, as soon as I'm done saying this phrase. Okay, we're all set to go now, guys.
Alrighty, I am ready. So we'll start with Phantasm then?
We will start
Yeah, all right.
with Phantasm.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
That's a 4
Okay.
all the way around.
All right, 4 is across the board.
All right. And so I guess that means that we should probably go chronologically and go ahead and go with Don't Look Now next.
3, 2, 1, go.
All right, I gave it a 4. Looks like Zach gave it
A 4.
I got a 3.
All right, so that's out of contention, and I think by the basic principles of math, I have a strong suspicion that I know what's going to win here.
All right, well, I guess we should probably bring up the big board for Wicker Man.
3, 2, 1, and wins it by a landslide.
Yeah, it's going to take our top scores for all three of us.
Yep.
Yep. Okay,
I
so I
think-
guess...
Chris's math was wrong, but that's okay. I think you gave a 4, and a 6, which is 14 points.
One of them was a 3. Okay, so I'll just
okay.
say that well, actually, no, I'll just say the Wicker Man got 5. There we go. Okay, the math makes sense now.
That's the exact same mistake I did. I made this 6 card for Wicker Man, and I was like, oh, wait. This is not correct math.
That was better than the one I did for the shitty cops one, because that's when we had the first one where we actually had
But
to
it's
add
irrelevant.
points.
It would have won either
Uh-huh.
way. It
Yep.
did not.
Yep.
It did not. Yeah. So Wicker Man is the favorite of all three of us. It is the clear winner. That means Chris wins a bonus movie. He could pick any fucking movie he wants. Make us watch
And-
it. We have no recourse. We can say whether we liked it or not, but it has no bearing on the round. It's just him being able to either treat us or torture us, depending on his inclination.
And I think today, what I'm going to do is something that I think it's actually a good movie. However, I'm going to spring it on you without any sense of what you're going to be able to find in it.
You can do whenever you want. You don't have to do it today.
Yeah.
But
Well, no, I'll do it right now. But I'm saying
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
giving you any sense of what it's about, or I'm going to ask that you don't research anything about it if you can.
Done.
because
The
you
movie-
already are picking our next theme.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I have to say what the next theme is too, right?
Yeah,
Are we
you
doing that
do.
now?
And pick the movie for that theme.
So do both. You have the power to do both right now.
Okay, so the theme for the next go around is going to be political thrillers.
Yeah. Okay.
okay.
So the next, which one did you want, Zach?
Oh,
no,
I
you
don't
did
care.
good. You're doing good. You're doing good.
I'm just saying you pick the order in which we watch these things because you have all
Okay.
the power right now. You are a dictator.
Okay,
That's right.
Okay. Here's the deal.
This is the waning.
the
when our
next-
listeners are listening to this, this is
Okay.
hopefully the waning days of the Trump administration, and you, my
Yes.
friend, you are the Donald Trump of this
Yeah,
podcast.
oh God!
You're just remove
I'm
all the
final
post
dictator.
offices. You're going to take away all the post.
So, on this one, for the random win pick that I get to do, we are going to go with Border. This is a 2018 film
Border.
directed by Border, Border. It is a 2018 Swedish film by Ali Abbasi, and it's based off a story from the same writer as Let the Right One In.
Okay.
And that is all I will tell you about it, and I will then ask.
I believe
Jim,
that
I will-
writer also wrote the movie, the book that the Snowman. The
Oh, yeah, probably,
terrible-
yeah.
I believe he also wrote
Yeah.
that book. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not bulletproof, but it is what it is. I'm going to suggest you guys tell me what the genre of this movie is. I would be curious about that.
Okay.
So, and I guess since I get to announce the theme for the next Honest to God go-around, I'm going to say political thrillers. And do I announce the first one? Yeah, I announced
Yep.
the first one. We're going to watch The Parallax View. Because
Okay.
I have not seen it, and everybody in the last couple weeks has been suggesting The Parallax View as a great movie. So I'm super curious. All I know is that it stars Warren Beatty.
Okay.
Okay, so let me ask you this follow-up question. Which of these two films are we watching first, Chris? That is
Oh.
your decision to make.
Go ahead, and we are going to watch Border first.
okay.
Okay. All right, so in that case, we'll watch
2
Border
weeks
next
of
time.
Border of 2 two Boruff movies back to
yeah.
back. God
It's
damn.
gonna be 3. You're talking. This week
Yeah.
was a Chris
Yes,
pick too.
That's
We
true.
got
Wow.
3 in a row.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we might mix up how we have people actually do the recaps of the movies. That's the one suggestion I would make for the next
You
season going
could
forward.
just shape up, mister.
Hey, heavy
Well,
is the
that's
head
true
that
too.
wears the
That's
crown.
true. I understand. I gotcha.
That's right. King for a day, fool at the sacrifice. You know what I'm saying?
And
Oh,
then
yeah, that's true.
When we get into the political thriller genre, that'll be Russell will have the second pick, and I'll have the last one. Will
Okay.
be super timely, and that we'll be releasing those after the election is over. And we'll probably record them before the election happens.
Right, so they'll be full of optimism and, you know.
Yeah, it'll be full of us saying, wouldn't it be crazy if something happened? And then by the time you hear it, you'll be like, oh, you poor summer children.
Sorry, we've already put
Winter
grandma on the
came.
trains. Yeah.
Oh, God. Yep.
Well, that's as good as a note as any to wrap this up. This has been a fun, spooky edition of the Movie Trap with a pretty surprising batch of films that, considering the golden picks we could have picked, I think we did a little deeper
on
touches.
The thriller, psychological horror side,
Yeah.
but, to be fair, we in some of our early runs had some pretty horror-adjacent movies.
That's true.
Yeah.
I feel like we have not shied away from the genre, so...
Mine at least had a monster.
Yeah, well, these are mildly tame. I imagine that we're going to watch something a little more intense very soon. So, yeah, should be fun. But yeah, this has been great. And we are out on every possible platform. You can catch us anywhere. Please subscribe if you can. Put a like or a heart or whatever it is in your particular version of social media help it would be. And for me, that's going to be signing off. Everybody have a great night. This has been Chris.
It's been Russell. Thanks for listening.
And this has been Zach. We'll see you next time with our special one-off border episode.
Ciao!